Someone will give me the cue.
Yes, we'll cue you as soon as it's ready.
Thank you. Okay.
We'll just trim some of the segments so this won't be a problem.
Okay.
You're live, Latasha.
Greetings. Welcome to Countdown of episode 1 of And She Could Be Next. I'm Latasha Brown with Black Voters Matter Fund, and I'll be your host tonight. It is the premiere night for And She Could Be Next. It's a night of celebration, of empowerment, community, and action. We thank you for joining us on this evening. As our country faces the dual pandemics of COVID and racial injustice, we are witnessing again women of color stepping up to lead. From essential workers to elected leaders, women of color are paving the way for justice and equality. Tonight, we will see the vital role that we play and offer ways that each of us can be a part of the effort. We have an amazing lineup for you this evening. We'll speak with the team behind this powerful documentary series, filmmakers Marge Salfina, Grace Lee, and Jota Sarda, who will tell us about this timely project and its significance to our country in this moment. We'll talk with inspiring elected leaders and organizers whose stories we will hear about in the film and share ideas for ways in which you can get involved, because we want to hear from you. So be sure to share and stay engaged in the chat. And She Could Be Next tells the story of a defiant movement of women of color who are transforming politics from the ground up. It's executive produced by Ava DuVernay and created by a team of women filmmakers of color. The 2-part documentary series spotlights both the systemic challenges these women face and the significant change that happens when they step into their power. The events of the last few weeks have shown us the unprecedented demand for real change and justice from the grassroots up. Lifting up the experiences, the voices, and the leadership of women of color has never been more relevant or important. I want to give a shout out to some of the organizations that are watching along with us tonight, the United States of Women and Engage, and thank our media sponsor tonight, Pop Sugar. Don't forget to tag us at hashtag And She Could Be Next PBS and share who you're watching with. Tonight in part 1, we'll meet the candidates and organizers as they begin their journey to challenge the status quo. As we count down to showtime, we invite you to be a part of the celebration and step into your own power. Here are a couple of things that you can do. 1, make you a vote plan. In your plan, are you registered? Do you know where your polling place is? Do you know who to call if you have problems? Go to our website, www.andshecouldbenext.com, for information and resources to make sure that your vote counts. Who are the amazing women in your life that are showing up and showing out as leaders? The women who are getting it done, who are making change and are standing for justice. We want from the C-suite to the leading grassroots organizers that are leading protests in the streets. We acknowledge that all women are leading in every facet of our lives. When you see them, tag them and make sure use the tag And She Could Be Next, so we can see them too. And third, help watch this film and organize an action squad and invite friends, family, and colleagues to watch. Now let's get started and watch the trailer for And She Could Be Next.
In the history of this country, any guesses out of 11,000 people that have served in the United States Congress, how many women of color have served?
There is this assumption that Black people don't vote, that Latinos are not American citizens, that Asian Americans are Republicans, and that young people are wholly unreliable.
I want you to understand that who I am is a product of a movement.
There are not enough people on the inside that look like me. People aspiring to be leaders in this country, they need to go through Women of Color because we're making our voices known.
Es un honor estar aquí con ustedes ahora para celebrar el amor que tienen ustedes como familias que están separadas por este muro.
When I say I'm a social justice seeker, I'm a mama for justice, or all these things, that's where I'm saying I'm American. I don't need to say it. I act like an American.
Candidates do not normally talk to people in the Asian American community because, historically speaking, we are the community that turns out to vote at the lowest rates. So we want to change that here today.
Cái cô kia cô không có ở nhà, bác gái có muốn đi bầu hôn với con dẫn đi bây giờ luôn.
We're no longer asking for permission to do what we need to do. We're going to do it, and we're going to lead from the top, and people need to see it.
The sort of traditional notions of what's possible in American politics are being challenged every day.
Elections are important, but our lives are on the line. Elections
Sisters and brothers, it's about building power in our community to win what is right.
Except the communities that need to be brought in reflect the new American majority. They're young, they're brown, they might speak another language.
And there's a lot of us.
I'm excited about the fact that women of color are now coming into our own, that we're standing up and taking our rightful place in the pantheon of leadership, that we're changing what the face of leadership looks like.
It is a new day, there's a new coalition, and ultimately we're gonna push this country forward because there's more of us than those that seek to do us harm.
That was just a little taste. I am so excited to actually introduce and talk to the talented, dynamic women behind this film. Director-producer Grace Lee, director-producer Marjan Salfina, and producer Joe Tassarda. Welcome, ladies. Thank you for such amazing work. I want to jump right in. I want to ask you all each, what do you want the audience to take away from this film?
I'm going to start. It's Marge. We want everyone to feel seen. So many of us live in a world where we don't feel seen enough. So we want to say, we see you, we see your joy, we see your labor, we see your smarts, we see your brilliance, we see your power. And you come on the shoulders of a long history of powerful women of color who have been changing this country for generations. So we all know that there's nobody who's coming to save us but ourselves. And it's time for us all to step up and step into our power. And this is our love letter to women of color and organizers around the country to say, we see you and we're with you.
And there really is an organizer in all of us, you know, and stepping into power, you know, we want to help you do that, to find your political home. That's one of the main messages of the film. Once you watch the film, we hope that you can go to our website, andshecouldbenext.com, where you can plug in. There's a map of the United States. You can find that organization that could be your political home, and then just plug in.
And Joy, what inspired you with this film? What was the inspiration for you three women to come together?
Well, you know, there's, as Marge and Grace were just talking about, there's a long tradition of women of color leading movements through generations. And we thought it was incredibly important to look at politics unapologetically through the lens of race and gender. And it appears that that theme is actually meeting its moment, which we're incredibly excited about. But yeah, all of us are incredibly politically active and have always been interested in systemic change. And that's what drove this project.
And so we saw a little taste, but how can people watch this film tonight?
Well, I'll take that. Okay, so it is a two-part film or series. So definitely, you know, you'll watch it tonight after this show if you're on the East Coast, and then you'll wait till 9 p.m. if you're on the West Coast. And then please do tune in tomorrow, because the second part is as good as the first part. So if you are watching it on broadcast, you just search through your listings. If you have a smart TV, please do get your PBS app, then search POV, then And She Could Be Next. And if you wish to watch it streaming, you can watch it on pbs.org, but you can also just go straight to our website, andshecouldbenext.com/watch. And at 6 p.m. Eastern time, each episode will start streaming, and there's a counter there, so you will know exactly what to do. And that way you have plenty of time to gather up your squad, your snacks, your beverages, and really start a discussion. And I will say that on our website, there's plenty of tools to really help start that kind of discussion. So we would appreciate that. All across this country, PBS is airing this show with the exception of Detroit and Georgia. So it's extra important that you make some noise in that part of the world, because you can't have both voter suppression and viewer suppression going on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marge, Grace, and Joy. Thank you so much for the work that you've done. And so what we're going to do is, now we're from the director's chairs to the seats of political power. Let's hear from some of the amazing women whose campaigns we will follow in And She Could Be Next.
Hi, my name is Maria Elena Durazo, and I decided to run for California State Senator to bring the voices of immigrant hotel housekeepers and construction workers to the Capitol. I am fighting alongside the women who want safe conditions when they clean homes and take care of our elderly. I am fighting for our Black and brown youth who ended up incarcerated because they never had the same chance as wealthy kids. I am fighting alongside garment workers who say enough is enough. They want to get paid for their hard work, making our fast fashion and personal protective equipment. I am fighting alongside immigrants that are locked up in detention centers and get sick with COVID-19 without any protections. We are at a moment in time when everyone is on the same page. People want change. This week, we voted to bring back affirmative action and require ethnic studies in our public colleges and universities. That's why I'm in Sacramento.
My name is Lucy McBath, and I am the Congresswoman for Georgia's 6th Congressional District. My story has been the same since I began my race in 2017. I'm fighting for my son Jordan, and so many others like him who have been wronged by our broken system. Jordan was 17 years old when he was shot and killed by a man who objected to the loud music he was playing in his car. Ever since then, my life has been changed forever. And even though I am fighting for Jordan, I'm also fighting for the thousands of children who lost their lives far too early. For the families who've experienced the same pain that I have experienced, and for communities of color who know my pain all too well. And I am fighting to ensure our laws protect each and every family in this country. No one should ever have to live in fear of senseless gun violence. So thank you for making this happen. And a huge congratulations to everyone who contributed to And She Could Be Next. All of your hard work truly has paid off.
Hi everyone, my name is Veronica Escobar, and I have the incredible privilege of being the Congresswoman for El Paso, Texas, the 16th Congressional District of Texas. I want to congratulate everyone involved in the process and in the film And She Could Be Next. I am very fortunate to be a small part of it, and I am even more fortunate to, along the way, have spent so much great time with Deb Eskenazi, an incredible and talented filmmaker who spent innumerable hours with me as we went up and down the US-Mexico border in 2018, trying to get out the vote, double turnout in Texas in order to send a strong message that Latinos and border communities would not be used for indignities by this administration, that we would use our vote and our voice to fight back. During that journey, I was running for this seat, and Deb got to experience so much of what I lived through, the incredible ups and the incredible downs of being a candidate. Since being an elected official, as a member of Congress, the work has focused on uplifting my community, which has been, unfortunately, ground zero for the Trump administration's hateful and horrific attacks against immigrants. The work, unfortunately, has to continue to fight an administration intent on dehumanizing the most vulnerable, but it is uplifting to see that there are so many incredible people in that fight with me, with us, and that we're in this together. And so I consider so much of what is in the film a celebration of that, the dignity of that work, the power of that work, and the significance of that work. Again, congratulations to everyone involved. Best wishes.
Some of the women who make it all possible. These are women. Let's talk to some of the movement leaders who are committed to getting women, particularly women of color, elected. We have a wonderful panel. We have Glenda Carr, who's president and CEO and founder of Higher Heights Leadership Fund. Erin Velarde, who's the founder and executive director of Vote, Run, Lead. Ashanti Galar, who is the president of Emerge. Stephanie Lopez, who's a program manager of Latinos Represent. Saru Bhawani, who is the founder and president of New American Leaders, and Prairie Rose Samoa, who is with the Advanced Native Political Leadership. I'm happy to have you all here. Welcome, ladies. And so I'm going to start with you, Erin. Why is it important to elect diverse leaders?
Two reasons. It's important because the country needs to be reflective so that little girls can see women who look like them, so that boys know that women can be leaders, but it also needs to be radical, right? We have to create a democracy and imagine a democracy that we have not seen yet. And that is only going to come from people who have fresh ideas, who have not been part of the old guard, and who are ready to try new things. And we see that when we elect women of color.
Ashanti, I would love for you to answer. Well,
thank you. For me, look at the numbers. We know that there are 520,000 elected offices in this country. Women, we are 50% of the population, 51%. We don't occupy 51% of those offices. So when we really want to talk about a reflective democracy or an inclusive democracy, that means that we need women at the table, but also women of color, because women of color are certainly nowhere near representing 50% of those offices. Also, if we just want to look at the times that we're living in, as you mentioned, Latasha, we're dealing with a health pandemic, we're dealing with a racial injustice pandemic. And who do we see at the front lines leading the charge at this moment? It's women of color. It's Black, brown, Indigenous women. They are the ones who are fighting. They're the ones who are getting the laws changed. So you can't change the policy without changing the policy makers. And that means you need more of us at the table.
Thank you so much. Prairie Rose, I know Native American women have just been throwing down and have just been leading the charge and doing so much wonderful work. And so I'm interested in you. What do you think is the value, particularly in this moment, and making sure that we have diverse leadership in place?
This is a political moment. As much as people are wanting to get involved in the fight, we also have to take the time to reflect on, this is time for change. We have to do this now. If we don't do this, it's not going to happen. And the previous speakers hit it right on the head. I mean, if we don't get involved, who's going to do this? So we have to step up and protect our children, our families, our communities, and get involved. If we don't change the leadership, that reflective democracy isn't gonna be for us. Right now, it's currently shining a glaring spotlight on a system that supports white supremacy and people in that power of white supremacy. If we want to unpack that and move away from that systems, we have to put more radical change in place. And that is not going to happen until Indigenous women, women of color, people of color start running for office and taking one, if not many, of those 520,000+ elected seats across this country.
Absolutely. As a woman of color who I remember running for office in my late 20s, it was really challenging. And so I know, Glenda Carr, that part of your whole organization is actually to lift up and to support women. And I'm just wondering from you, what are some of the challenges that women of color face as they're running for political office?
Yep. So the work that at Higher Heights Leadership Fund, we partner with the Center for American Women in Politics, which I think all of our colleagues work with the amazing partners there. And so they are the holder of all the information about women in elected office. And so we partner with them in particular at looking at Black women, the status of Black women in American politics. And the research points to several things that women, but particularly women of color and Black women, are not only not encouraged to run for office, they're actually discouraged from running for office, right? Yet and still on the other side, we pour more into our democracy than what we get back. And so the women of color in this country are underrepresented and underserved. But what you see is more of us are stepping off the sidelines. Another barrier is that, you know, there's all this words about electability, right? And that women of color are not elected, but this docuseries will show women that were underfunded, were told that they were not going to win, that they were not likable or electable, and they still persisted. And so there are still man-made barriers and institutional obstacles that are in place, but women of color are jumping over them and sliding under them, and frankly, breaking them in a way that will continue to change the fabric of our democracy. You know, it's 2020, and what we've seen, it's been the longest 6 months ever, but we've seen women of color literally leading this country forward through COVID-19, through the uprising since George Floyd's killing. So at the end of the day, step out of our way because we are leading.
Asha. And so Stephanie Lopez, I know that the Latinx community is the fastest growing community. And when we look at the underrepresentation of Latinas in elected position, I'm wondering, what are some of the challenges that you think are unique facing Latino women that are running for public office right now? What are some of the challenges and the barriers?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think women of color in general face a multitude of different challenges. And with the Latinx community, we see that there is a range of intersecting identities, right? So there are Afro-Latinas, there are members of the LGBTQ community, et cetera. So a lot of the challenges that we face are inextricably linked to racism and sexism. It's 2020, like Glenda said, and there are still communities in the United States that have never been represented by a woman or by a person of color. So when a woman of color is running in those places, they need to face those two barriers. And in addition to that, women of color are not recruited. You know, not only are they discouraged to run, they are also not recruited by political parties, which means that they feel like they can't run, when in reality, you don't have to be recruited in order to run and have a successful campaign. And, you know, I think, as Glenda said, women of color have been leading the charge for the last hundreds of years, but also within these last 6 months that have been very tiresome for a lot of us. So I think it's really important to make sure that we're giving them credit for the emotional, physical, and mental labor that they've been doing, especially with all the challenges that they face.
Thank you. And Sayu, when we're talking about new American leaders and a lot of work that you all have been doing, a lot of the energy, and young people have just been relentless and just been very creative. I'm wondering, in terms of the work, as you're seeing kind of the possibility and the potential with your work with new American leaders, what gives you hope in this moment? What gives you hope, and what makes you excited? What are you excited about?
Well, I am so excited by the women who are stepping up to run. That is the most hopeful thing. It's the hardest thing, as we all know. But one of the things we talk about often is that in our everyday lives, we're experiencing a lot of hardship. Systemic racism, oppression, sexual violence, all of these things. And so when we talk to young women who are considering running and who are worried about how hard it's going to be, they're coming in with a lot of interest and ambition. And what we underline for them is that some of the things they're experiencing every day are already hard. And I always suggest that they think about how to take that hardship and use it for policymaking power. So I'm mostly excited by the women who, despite all the racism and sexism that they face, are willing to walk up to the front doors of voters. During the COVID pandemic, there's been so much mutual aid that's been organized. And then lastly, I'll just say that what's super exciting in New York, where I'm from, is to see how many women of color decided to challenge incumbents in the New York State primaries and how well they did. So it's not that if we run, we can win. And that's super exciting to see. And we'll see that over and over in this series.
That's a powerful thing. If we run, we can win. I always say, if we work together, when we work together, we win. And so all of this wisdom on this panel, what I would like to do is I would just like to go around and ask you all, if there's one bit of advice that you can tell a woman of color that's running for office, what would that be? And so I'm going to start with you. I'm going to start with you, Erin.
We say it all the time at Vote, Run, Lead. You are enough to run as you are. Everything that you need to run for office, you already have. And all of that little stuff, we can teach you how to public speak or sharpen those skills, but you have exactly what is needed. And in fact, this country needs you right now.
Thank you. Glenda.
Well, in the spirit of Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to ever be elected to Congress, we want you to be unbought and unbossed, right? And to step off the sidelines and to do exactly what Black women and women of color have been doing, which is we are the defenders of our homes, our communities, and our democracy. All we need you to do is to step into that power.
Thank you. Perry Rose.
Yeah, I would say you are what your ancestors dreamed of. We were put into a system that left us out, and until we get into that system to start making those meaningful changes, that healing won't start. So you are the healer, you are in that place, you are there to heal the generations to come, so run.
Thank you. Ashanti.
I tell our Emerge-alums all the time, think about that powerful, amazing woman that you love who's in elected office, and realize she had to start somewhere too. And it started with, I'm going to run for office. So that's where you can start, and that's how you blaze your trail, and you have all of these amazing organizations who want to support you.
Sayu.
I would say, we're not going to end systemic racism until we get the racists out of the system. So we're the ones who have to be there to make that change.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I think our bit of advice is to know your why. Why is it that you are running, and stand firm in that? Because we know that the society that we live in constantly undermines women of color and makes us doubt ourselves and makes us work harder with very little return. So we have to be very firmly planted in what we believe in and why we're running, and knowing our worth in that, so that we can move forward and run and win.
Thank you, ladies, for taking the time to share. I don't know how anybody could hear all of that wisdom and not get excited to run. Yes, women, we need you to run, women of color that are watching this. And thank you all for all of your work that you're doing to make sure that that opportunity exists. So we thank you. And so we're very grateful for this conversation, and we're very grateful for the women who actually make themselves available to jump out, to actually run for office. It's a grueling process in terms of their families, the toll that they put on themselves, but to put themselves in a position to represent the community, it's always a powerful. And so what we're going to have is we're going to have a conversation next with two elected leaders. So watch this. Hi, ladies. So we will continue the conversation, and we have our second panel. I love this panel. These are, they bring the fire. I was so excited to see you and say, in the film and the work that you do, all of you all. And so I want to introduce you all and have a short conversation now with some of the game changer leaders who are on the front lines. I have Nsé Ufot, who is the CEO of the New Georgia Project, Tania Unzanta, who is the political director of Mehinte, Stephanie Cho, who is executive director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice. I'm so welcome, ladies, and joining in this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So I am going to jump right in because I know time is short. I'm gonna jump right in. COVID-19 has erroneously been described as the great equalizer, but we know that it has disproportionately impacted communities of color at higher rates of illness and death for African Americans and particularly the Latinx community, to a spike in the racist attacks against Asian Americans. What are the types of solutions being discussed to address the racial disparities that allow a disease like COVID-19 to disproportionately impact people of color? And how does community-led leadership play in that critical role? I'm going to start with you, Stephanie.
I think it's the concept of mutual aid and care that's always been part of the way we interact with community, but now it's just on a much larger scale. And mutual aid combined with our political education is the organizing work that is needed right now. And in Georgia, communities of color organizations are providing that critical basic needs, and we've been doing that. And we are that trusted source of information to the community. And for us, we do that in multiple different AAPI and MEMSA languages. And even before COVID-19, all the groups, particularly on this panel, were already trusted in the community. And when a massive crisis hits, like COVID-19, when the governor and government is not taking leadership to fill in the gaps and actually doing harmful things inside the community, then it's our duty as communities of color and leaders in those organizations to really step up. And in the South, it's women of color that are taking that lead. And I'm a queer Korean mom living in Georgia, and it's not always easy, but I believe in the power of our immigrant communities, particularly some of the things that I've been seeing lately. And at the very least, another real important strategy right now is really to defund police and ICE. This call has been out in the streets, but it really needs to be embodied in the change that happens in Georgia. And because we're all in Georgia, we're seeing that it's not changing fast enough. And then for us in the Asian American community, it's the racial healing and calling in of our AAPI and the MEMSA community members to really be, it is our actual duty to be accomplices in the movement for Black lives. And I think doing that education work is something that we've been doing across the state.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come to you and say you are one of the key characters in the film where we follow, the filmmakers follow you with the New Georgia Project. And I know that a lot of the work that you all do is not just centered in Metro Atlanta, but is in the rural communities. And we do know that rural communities have been particularly hit pretty hard. And so what do you think has been the role of community leadership in this moment of COVID-19?
I think that it's been essential. I think we heard Marge say earlier that there's no one coming to save us. And I think that there are few people who have more clarity about that than our siblings who live in rural parts of our country, particularly in rural Georgia. We have a friend named Keisha Gaskins Nathan who called this moment a glasses cleaning moment. The clarity that people have that, our current crop of elected officials through either like their negligence or intentionally have no problem taking actions that could lead to our death, right? And so we've seen community leaders step up in the realest way to figure out how we take care of each other and what we build, what our structures, what our infrastructure is, what our country, what our government is going to look like on the other side of this. not to take us back, but the question that you posed to Stephanie, I think one of the things that got clear in this moment is the need for single payer healthcare or Medicare for all, or call it whatever the hell you want to. But the idea that we have a responsibility to each other to set sort of a baseline for care. And that when one person doesn't have access to healthcare, none of us have access to healthcare.
That's right.
So when in tight-knit communities like we see in rural Georgia, where people worship together and they work together and they celebrate together, if without access to quality healthcare, one person gets sick, we're all at risk for getting sick. And so I see a renewed call for the expansion of Medicaid in Georgia, not as some like fringe issue that people try to frame it as, but like as essential to how we are going to live on the other side of this.
Thank you. And Tania, I know Mahente has been doing a lot of work in terms of grassroots on the ground. And what we do know is that people of color are primarily essential workers. And oftentimes we're on the front lines of really being disproportionately impacted by this. And so I'm wondering for you, what do you think some of the solutions that we should be talking about and demanding right now in light of the COVID-19 crisis?
Thank you. Yeah, and absolutely. Our folks are disproportionately impacted, and not just because of the work that we do, but because the society and the state in particular isn't built to support the choices that we need to make, right? People are going to work because our governor has decided that the state shouldn't stay shut down and therefore isn't giving resources to people that are alternatives to be able to go to work. So to me, I mean, we need to organized to change policy that includes redistributing resources. Defunding police has been mentioned. The city of Atlanta actually spends $218 million on Atlanta police. That's 1/3 of our city's budget. At the same time, I think we have to organize to cover where the government fails us. I think that's what mutual aid is. I think that's what like people organizing for their community, just because we know this is gonna take some time and people need our support right now. And I think the third thing is take people out of office when they're not serving us, run for office ourselves, but also, you know, as people have been mentioning, like that's clearly important, but also the infrastructure that's needed to get our own people elected is actually the part that we're trying to play and the thing that we're trying to do. I mean, as we saw in our elections here in Georgia over the last couple of years, we can have good candidates, we can have people excited about candidates, and still there's an infrastructure that prevents people from voting and that actually fails us when it comes to promoting people's political participation.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for the work that you do and continue to blaze trails. We thank you. Grateful for your participation tonight. And so, you know, I want to go back to, we want people to take action. We're hoping that this film actually inspires you to act. And so there's a couple of things that we want you to do. We want you to be a part of this movement and step into your power. One, find a political home. Any of these groups that you just heard from, it will be a great place for you to start. You can find more about each one of them. If you go to our website, you can find more information about them at andshecouldbenext.com. Make sure you visit the website and share it with your friends and with your network. Make sure that you also make a vote plan, that you need to know that you're registered, to make sure that you know where you're going to vote and all the information you know, so that there won't be any barriers that prevent you from casting your vote. You can also go to andshecouldbenext.com and learn more information, and then sign up to be an action squad. It is time to work, ladies. It is to let's work and build power together. We are the power that the world needs. And so you can help spread the word about this film, organize a watch party, and find resources and tools that you can mobilize in your community to lead up to the 2020 election. And so we're just a few minutes away from part one, but we've got some special guests that I want you all to hear from. We have women who have stepped in that role, have made themselves available, and they're highlighted in this film, but they're also serving in elected office. So I just want to welcome Bashura Amarwala and Rashida Tlaib. We're so grateful to have both of you on. How are you doing?
So much. No, we're okay. I'm hustling, trying to legislate and organize and speak truth to power and all those things. But I'm really pleased. Bushra's all excited. We were texting just now. I'm, been so inspired by this young lady. When I was her age, I was so scared. But to see her just out there, just putting herself out there takes so much courage. And I just really thank her for that. And this was really an honor to be part of this. I think like behind the scenes, kind of everything happening. And when you finally see the finished product, I think for me as a mom, I'm like, my babies, look at them. They were so little.
I know.
And just seeing them react. I know, but Ms. Brown, I'll tell you, like, even for me, it was just more of that than just the campaigning. I'm like, and I think even as a mom, you don't notice those things. And all of a sudden,
right.
and you've seen these moments kind of like, you almost feel like you're watching it. And it was pretty incredible. So I just love that I'm able to be not only, this, Palestinian Muslim woman from Southwest Detroit, but I'm also this, mom just doing her thing with our kids next to me. And so I hope all the women that see this also see that we're also unapologetically still moms. And like,
right.
for so long, my mom used to think like, oh, you have to choose. No, you don't. You could be both. Actually, if we cleared out the room and just put a bunch of mothers in all the problems in our country.
Absolutely. That's what I loved about it. What I loved about the film is in the film, you are clearly a badass, but you are a mother and an organizer and a political leader. And I so loved it and so happy to have you and that you were lifted in the film. But Bushra, let me say, you were fierce and fantastic and just young and energy. I had the same feeling when I was watching you. I was like, my goodness, at that age, I don't know if I was thinking that like that at that age.
So
I was doing
sweet.
work.
Thank you both. Thank you so much. I'm like blushing right now. This really means a lot. Like I always say that, Rashida, you are such an inspiration to me. People always ask like, who do you look up to in the political realm? And I always say, obviously the first Muslim woman in Congress. Like, what do you mean? The way with so much grace and resilience, it truly inspires me. So thank you. And thank you for all the kind words. So I'm super excited for this conversation and everything.
So Bushra, what I want to ask is, as a young woman, so there's one thing that you're dealing with all kinds of this intersection. You're like at the perfect intersection where we're talking about from sexism to racism to classism to ageism. Oftentimes we don't talk about, here you are a really young woman who decided to run for office. And I'm just wondering what inspired you and moved you to make that move? What was it that you drew your strength from or made you decide to make that?
Yeah. I jokingly say that ignorance is bliss. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, which is why I kind of went ahead.
I just love your honesty, Bushra. I love that.
But that was, I think, like the grand scheme of things. But at a smaller scale, it was someone asked me to run for public office, and I didn't even know that that's something that I could ever do to begin with. So I kind of just went ahead and like built the campaign as I went along, and it was pretty scrappy, and it was put together like on the fly. And I was my own campaign manager for parts of it. But I think like even looking at the film, like looking back at how like everything was done offhand like that, it makes it seem all the more special too, seeing that I was like a freshman in college and I just graduated 2 weeks ago. So really, truly just documenting that journey.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. And so there was something around your confidence that was just so like, it moved me. I was like, I want to follow her. And so when you think about kind of where you draw your inspiration, where do you draw your inspiration from?
I think from the people around me, seeing people who always remain true to themselves and speak the truth in power, regardless of what's being thrown at them. Like I find that to be so incredibly inspiring. And I think that their resilience is what helps me and aids me to keep on going myself. So it's definitely all of the amazing and strong and vulnerable and authentic women that I'm able to be in touch with. And it's so nice that social media makes that bridge all the more even too.
That's great. And Rashida, so it's one thing that before you go into office, right? Because and there's another thing once you've served. And so I'm just interested from you, what has been kind of your biggest learning lessons in terms of where before the film was made and where you are now? What are some of your key lessons that you've learned?
I mean, I think honestly, even when we win, there's still so much work to do. But even then, staying really connected to movement on the ground is so critically important because, Bushra, all of us, Veronica, Lucy Macbeth, Deb Holland, we're all in a institution that wasn't really built for people like us, or that, it's not even just the diversity. I always keep telling people it's our lived experiences. It's what we bring forward and how we talk about it. So we speak differently, right? We see things differently. And so, it's so important. And one of the things I realized right away is staying connected to the grassroots groups on the ground. Right. Because when I'm trying to combat poverty, and move with a sense of urgency, they're with me and they get it. They know why I'm like, water needs to be a human right? That we need to end mass incarceration. They get it. And they give credibility to the work I'm trying to do in the halls of Congress. And so that's one lesson. And then this lesson of, when you get here, they kind of try to gaslight you. Like, oh yeah, they try to be like, nah, you got to wait. That's not how it's done. And I'm like, well, it didn't work. It's not been working before the status quo and how you've been trying to do it. So then what do we need to do, right? And so those are the two key lessons that I'm realizing. And I don't know about you, Latasha, but like one of the things I realize about this generation, like Bushras and everybody, like, I'm 43. And I just remember being in my early 20s, that it was very rare to find other women uplifting other women. You notice that? And so it's something has shifted. And we realize that is so key important. And so I realize a lot of my sisters in service that are in Congress right now, we don't have to be all on the same page on everything, but we hear each other, we see each other, and we uplift each other, we support each and protect each other. And so those are the kind of three things that really just came to light serving in the last year and a half.
So Rashida and Bushra, thank you so much. And I think you're absolutely right. There's something about, there's this women energy that we are lifting each other up. We're connecting, we're making those networks. And I think that's why we're stepping in our power. As we step in our power, all of us, it creates space for all of us. So thank you all so much. And so we're getting ready to go on the show in a few minutes. I'm so excited about it. We want to make sure that you stay engaged in the conversation. So tag us, if you're watching this, tag us at And She Could Be Next at PBS. And She Could Be Next PBS. Tag someone that you think should run for office. Encourage a woman, like literally encourage someone to run, or someone that's running. Make sure that you're supporting them, and make sure that you tune in also tomorrow night for the pre-show. We'll get together at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time for the premiere of Part 2 that starts at 9 p.m. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, all of the ladies who joined me in this conversation today. Thank you for the directors, and we're excited about this film. Thank you for joining. Have a great night. Enjoy the show.